Welcome to Ninerology, and it is Monday after a weekend full of preseason games. But the most important topic isn't a preseason game. It is the top 10 quarterback rankings that came out on ESPN, on NFL.com, and also according to other analysts. In fact, ESPN's insider poll, which is done by NFL executives, coaches, and scouts, did not list Brock Purdy as a top 10 NFL quarterback. And that's the question. Is Brock Purdy a top 10 quarterback in the NFL as it stands today? Now, to understand that, we need full context. What is the top 10 that ESPN currently has? Now, when you look at this top 10, I think the majority of it's pretty good. I have a couple question marks as far as how high some may be. But yeah, let's go ahead and go over that list. You have Patrick Mahomes at 1. You have Josh Allen at 2. Joe Burrow at 3. Lamar at 4. Jaden Daniels at 5. You have Matthew Stafford at 6. You have Justin Herbert at 7. Jared Goff at 8. Jalen Hurts at 9. Baker Mayfield at 10. Now, Brock Purdy would have been around 12. They had Kyler Murray ranked ahead of Brock Purdy when it came to votes, which is pretty interesting because that tells you what other scouts and other teams think of Brock Purdy. That tells you that they think that Brock Purdy is a product of the system, that Brock Purdy is a product of the stars around him. And while there might be some truth to that, you look at last year, the 49ers did not make the playoffs. You got to first look at Brock Purdy without the superstars. But the flip side of that is you look at any of your top 5 quarterbacks in the game right now, they all have stars and studded rosters around them. You look at the Chiefs. The Chiefs were well on their way to a three-peat, which they didn't get. We all know that the Eagles just throttled them. But they've had the number 1, number 2 defense for the past 3 to 4 years. That's right, the number 1 to 2 defense across the board. We're talking about historic defenses. That's what the Chiefs have had. You look at Patrick Mahomes and the studs around him that they've started to put in with after Tyreek Hill left. They just picked up Xavier Worthy a couple years ago. So they're starting to get that speed back. You still have Travis Kelce there. You still have a dominant offensive line. Again, your defense is always going to keep you in the game. You take a look at Lamar Jackson, always with the top 3 defense around him. You got Joe Burrow. You got all that money that you're putting at the wide receiver position. Jalen Hurts had one of the best rosters around him. They had the number 1 defense, actually almost neck and neck with Kansas City last year, but we saw how much they just suffocated Patrick Mahomes. So you can't just say a quarterback can't have a star-studded team around them. Top 5 all have star-studded teams around them. But the question is that what makes Brock Purdy, or is Brock Purdy actually a top 10 quarterback? Now, before we get there, let's talk about this list that ESPN put together. You have Patrick Mahomes that they have at 1, Josh Allen at 2, Joe Burrow at 3, Lamar at 4, Jaden Daniels at 5, Matthew Stafford at 6, Justin Herbert at 7, Jared Goff at 8, Jalen Hurts at 9, and Baker Mayfield at 10. Again, they had Kyler Murray ranked ahead of Brock Purdy, which I think is laughable. But I want to share with you my list, and we'll break it down a little bit, specifically Brock Purdy, because that's what we're talking about today. I have Patrick Mahomes at 1. I have Lamar Jackson at 2. I have Josh Allen at 3. I have Joe Burrow at 4. I have Jalen Hurts at 5. I have Jaden Daniels at 6. Matthew Stafford at 7. Justin Herbert at 8. 9, I have Baker Mayfield. And 10, I have Brock Purdy. Now, I have Brock Purdy edging out both CJ Stroud and Jared Goff, but I want to share with you why. Now, there's some conversations that Baker Mayfield maybe should be ahead of Justin Herbert. I can be convinced of that, but this is specifically my list, so it's my opinion. I do believe that Jalen Hurts is a top 5 quarterback. I think he proved that this year, even though his stats were terrible. In fact, I just want to share with you a few things when it comes to Jalen Hurts' stats. In fact, when it came to the actual QBR, he barely hit 10. When it came to interceptions, he actually did very well this past year because he only threw 5, but he threw under 3,000 yards, which put him, again, outside the top 10 there. Completion percentage, that put him right at number 10. But when you take into totality the QBR, the percentage, he was barely top 20 when it came there. So he was definitely surrounded by a star-studded team. Now, mind you, week 6 and week 7, there were conversations of, do we need to bench Jalen Hurts because of how he was performing? Now, it's funny, winning can cure a lot of things because it cured that, and now I have him in the top 5 of my quarterback rankings. But I think there's something to be said about performing in the playoffs, which is why I have Lamar at 2 and not at 1. Lamar Jackson is a 2-time MVP winner, which means he produces and he shows out during the regular season. The problem is the playoffs. That's right, the playoffs. It reminds me of the conversation of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning is by far my favorite quarterback of all time. Even though there's other quarterbacks that have more Super Bowl rings, you can talk about yada yada, success in the playoffs. Peyton Manning will always be my favorite quarterback because of how he looked at the game, how he prepared, the way how he just knew what the defense was going to throw at him. He wasn't the fastest, wasn't the strongest, but the way he dissected a team and the way he prepared, he's my favorite all-time quarterback in the game is Peyton Manning. But the conversation was Peyton Manning and Tom Brady as they were going through their prime, and all of a sudden you start seeing Peyton Manning being the MVP of the regular season, Tom Brady just jumping that and elevating it when it came to the playoffs. And I think that's what you see with Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson owns the regular season. But when it comes to the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes just wins. He just wins. Now, can that be attributed to his top defense, to Andy Reid? Absolutely. I think you give them some credit, but you also have to give credit to Patrick Mahomes too. I do think if you put Lamar in Kansas City's offense, they win the next 2 to 3 Super Bowls because Andy Reid's going to Andy Reid, and you put Lamar with that defense, that's scary. But again, that's not just the only question, but that's why I have Lamar at 2 and Patrick Mahomes at 1. But you start going down further. Jalen Hurts at 5. I think he proved it during the Super Bowl run. I think he's going to continue to make strides. He earned his $55 million contract a year. You have Matthew Stafford, who's won a Super Bowl. You have Joe Burrow and Josh Allen. None of them have won a Super Bowl, but the way that they play the game, you look at how they run the offense. You look, Joe Burrow, if it weren't for his crummy defense, he'd probably be up there in the conversation of having 1 to 2 Super Bowls and 1 to 2 MVPs. Again, he averaged 40 points a game on offense, and their defense gave up an average of 45 a game. Like, that's pretty atrocious. But you get down further in this list. Let's talk about Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy could have really helped himself this past year because he had a lot of superstars that were out. You had Christian McCaffrey that was out. You had Trent Williams that was out. You had Brandon Ayuk that was out. You had Deebo Samuel that was going back and forth between in and out. And your defense was decimated as well. And so I think Brock Purdy had a lot of opportunities to shut some of the naysayers up. The problem is he didn't perform as well as he could have. In a contract year, a lot of people expected him to take that next step. Great story, Mr. Irrelevant. He takes the team, gets them on the verge of a Super Bowl. In fact, he gets to the Super Bowl. His last play on the game, he leaves the team and gives them the lead. The last time he steps on there, then Patrick Mahomes comes over. The rest is history. But Brock Purdy did what he needed to do, got them in the scoring position. They got a field goal. They just ended up giving up the touchdown to Patrick Mahomes. Brock Purdy showed that he's able to get you there. The problem is, can Brock Purdy help and elevate the players around him to continue to play better? Not just the ones that are already superstars, but the ones that are up and coming and developing. You saw him do that with Juwan Jennings. Can he do that with Ricky Pearsall? Can he? Can he do that with Juwan Jennings again? Can he do that with Jacob Cowing? Can he do that with Watkins? And so there's a lot of questions out there for Brock Purdy. Can he get this team to the Super Bowl even though it's not star-studded anymore? You have the players that are getting older. Brock Purdy has always been, in fact, not this year, last year, he was number 1 in completion percentage rating. He was number 1 when it comes to passes over 10 yards. He was number 1 when it came to QBR. And so he had a lot of these number 1 stats. And then last year he had a big drop off. And so I think he's got a lot to prove, but I think he's proven he can get to deep into the playoffs multiple times. In fact, outside of last year, all he's known is the playoffs because that's where he's gotten the team. In fact, we all know what happened against the Eagles where he messed up his arm. That could have gotten him to back-to-back games against the Chiefs. Who knows? Maybe they would have split it. But Brock Purdy's shown that he knows what it takes to win and can get you there. Problem is, can he get you over that hump? And one of the things that's praised about Brock Purdy is his elusiveness on the field, where he can extend plays, but he can also run. His quick decision making. Everybody knows that playing quarterback isn't just about having the strongest arm. if it was, the Raiders wouldn't be that bad. In fact, you would have had Jamarcus Russell would have taken them to the promised land. But being strong, being tall, and having a good arm doesn't get you victories. It's knowing the offense. It is also making the right decisions, putting your players in the right spot so that they can succeed, running the offense as it should be ran, but also helping to elevate the players around you. And I think Brock Purdy has a lot to prove, but I think he's proven enough to get get him into the top 10 conversation. Again, I have him at 10. I have him ahead of CJ Stroud and ahead of Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff is over-promising but under-delivering. I think CJ Stroud would have been top 10 if he didn't have as bad of a year last year. I think Jaden Daniels could be top 5 if he does well again. They've given him more weapons, so we'll see what happens there. But I think all the other players in the top 10 have proven that they can get their team and elevate their team. They make the right decisions, and they're continuing to improve their craft. I think Brock Purdy, if he wants to be a top 5 quarterback in this game, he needs to continue improving. Because Mr. Irrelevant, as well as that is a good story, he's now being paid $55 million a year, which means he needs to perform. And you need to be a top 10 quarterback. You want other people to think of you. Put a chip on your shoulder, the fact that you didn't make the top 10 according to ESPN, Chris Sims, or the NFL. But the fact is, you need to perform. You need to put your money where your mouth is. You're getting paid like it, like a top 10 quarterback. Now it's time to perform like it. And I think he's going to rise to the occasion, and I think he's going to do that. And I think it starts week 1 in a very loud environment in Seattle. And I think he can show in that first game that not only can he play when the chips are stacked against him, but he can lead the team without his number 1 receiver in Brandon Ayuk, that he can lead the team despite injuries, he can lead the team despite a decimated defense that is trying to come back into their own, that he can lead the team in a hostile environment. And starting week 1, we'll see what he can do. But yes, I believe Brock Purdy is a top 10 quarterback, number 10, but still top 10 nonetheless. Well, that's all we have. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.